Good day, everyone. So, at this moment, I will be discussing about the cognitive theory. So, in my presentation, I will be discussing the following. So, first is the key concepts. Next is the history of cognitive theory. Four stages of cognitive development. The sensory motor stage, the pre-operational stage, concrete operational stage, formal operational stage, and then the factors that influence how children learn and grow. And then we have the schemas, assimilation, accommodation, and equilibration. So, Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development suggests that children move through four different stages of learning. His theory focuses not only on understanding how children acquire knowledge, but also on understanding the nature of intelligence. So, in his theory, Piaget posits that intelligence is a result of four factors, so namely the following. So we have the intellectual operations or the person's logic and reasoning. So this is developed during the sensory motor stage. And then we have the intellectual structure. So a person's ability to organize his or her thought. And this is during the pre-operational stage. And then we also have the intellectual strategies, a person's ability to analyze and predict. So during the concrete operational stage, and then we have the intellectual content, a person's ability to understand and learn during the formal operational stage. So, according to Piaget, children's learning is not passive. So, they must construct their knowledge through actions and experience. However, the way in which they do this is not the same for all children. Children go through stages in their cognitive development, and it is essential to know that it is not a linear process. So, history of this theory. So, or the proponent of this theory. So, Piaget was born in Switzerland in the late 1800s and was a precocious student, publishing his first scientific paper when he was just 11 years old. So, imagine that one. He is a gifted, or shall we say, a genius student. His early exposure to the intellectual development of children came when he worked as an assistant to Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon as they worked to standardize their famous IQ test. So while he was a young boy, Piaget was fortunate enough to spend time with a 4-year-old named Charles Kanga, so perhaps one of the best known of Piaget's famous infant subjects. So in his study of infant and child thought, Piaget finds evidence for a developmental progression that was repeated in each of the children he studied. So Piaget hypothesized that his subjects followed a universal developmental sequence that could be observed in each child, and that this sequence could be reliably and consistently observed in a psychologically correct way. So that begins his that is the reason, or that is the very main reason why he proposed this theory of cognitive development. So now we will try to differentiate Piaget and Vygotsky's theory. So Piaget's theory differs in important ways from those of Lev Vygotsky, another influential figure in the field of child development. So Vygotsky acknowledged the roles that curiosity and active involvement play in learning, but placed greater emphasis on society and culture. So Piaget felt that development is largely fueled from within, so from our mind. So while Vygotsky believed that external factors such as culture and people, such as the parents, caregivers, and peers, play a more significant role. So Vygotsky's theory is all about socio-cultural theory of development. So meaning the person's cognitive development is largely influenced by their surrounding culture, while Piaget's theory states that our for the children's development is based or the mind grows or intelligence develop as children grow. So as a result, Piaget believed that people have the same capacity to learn as they do at any point in their lives. At the same time, Vygotsky thought that as children mature, their ability to learn improves on the basis that their social interactions with caregivers and peers become more sophisticated. So Piaget proposed that intelligence grows and develops through a series of stages. So older children do not just think more quickly than younger children, of course. So instead, there are both qualitative and quantitative differences between the thinking of young children versus older children. So Piaget's stage theory describes the cognitive development of children. Cognitive development involves changes in cognitive process and abilities. So in Piaget's view, early cognitive development involves processes based upon actions and later progresses to changes in mental operations. So this of course plays out in many other aspects of development. So for example, Vygotsky believed that social interactions were more critical to language development than internal language. At the same time, Piaget thought that people have a natural affinity for language and that children are likely to learn to speak before they can read or write. So despite these differences, it is common for people to need clarification on the two theories because they are similar in many respects. So now we will proceed with the four stages of cognitive development. So the sensory motor stage. So this begins from birth up to 2 years of age. So these are the major characteristics and developmental changes during this stage. So first, um, children know the world through movements and sensations, and then they learn about the world through basic actions such as sucking, grasping, looking, and listening. So they learn that things continue to exist even when they cannot be seen, or we call that one object permanence, and realize that they are separate beings from the people and objects around them. And also they realize that their actions can cause things to happen in the world around them. So during this stage, so for example, if you try to brush your finger against a baby's face, so they will instinctively start sucking. So um, that's how they perceive. So that's how they try to learn. And also this object permanence. So for example, as you can observe on babies, so they know who their mother was or who their mother is. So for example, so their mother is gone, so they will try to seek for her. So that's so even if they cannot be seen, so they would try to, or they learn that their mother exists. So next is the pre-operational stage. So this begins from 2 years old up to 7 years old. So the major characteristics and developmental changes during this stage are the following. So they begin to think symbolically and learn to use words and pictures to represent objects. So tend to be egocentric and struggle to see things from the perspective of others and getting better with language and thinking, but still tend to think in very concrete terms. So and at this stage, so their language becomes or their language use becomes more mature. They also develop memory and imagination which allows them to understand the difference between past and future and engage in make believe. So there are five key behaviors during this stage. So we have the imitation or mimic other person's actions. So they will try to mimic. So for example, a child, if you will say to them, oh, clap your hands, so they will also clap their hands. And then symbolic play, they begin assigning characteristics or symbols to objects. For example, they may pretend a stick is a sword and then drawing. So, imitation and symbolic play are both essential elements to drawing. So, it begins as meaningless scribbles and progresses to more accurate representatives of objects and people. So, for example, if you see a child draw and you will ask them, what is that? So they will say, oh, this is my mother, this is my father. So even if it doesn't look like a human, so for them, it is the representation of the object that they have already perceived or they believe. So next one is mental imagery. So another key behavior of the pre-operational stage. So at this type of behavior, children start to visualize a wide range of things in mind. For example, they will try to imagine that they are a superhero or a princess, just like what we can observe to children every time they will see a movie of a superhero and they want to become a superhero. And then sometimes they will try to um, imitate what a superhero is. And then verbal evocation of events. So children can use words to describe and represent past events, people, or items. So at this type of behavior, they begin to invent an imaginary friend. For example, they will play house or they will play uh, kitchen. So you can observe that children are nasa like Historia, and then they were just like imagining that they have someone that to play with, or they have a baby, and then they will um, feed him or her. So that's how they behave during this stage. So next is the concrete operational stage. So this is from 7 to 11 years old. So these are the major characteristics and developmental changes during this stage. So children begin to think logically about concrete events, and they begin to understand the concept of conservation, that the amount of liquid in a short, wide cup is equal to that in a tall, skinny glass, for example. And then thinking becomes more logical and organized, but still very concrete. So, and then they begin using inductive logic or reasoning from specific information to a general principle. So at this stage, so there are three elements. The first is conservation and reversibility. So when we say conservation, so that this is understanding that objects can change in size, volume, or appearance, but essentially remain the same. So for example, so just like the example that I've said a while ago. So for example, that amount of liquid in a short wide cup is equal to that in a tall skinny glass. And then reversibility means that some things that have changed can return to their original state while others cannot. For example, freezing a water or a liquid. So when they become ice, they will if you expose them to the surrounding environment, or if you expose to heat, so they will melt. But that water will also turn back to ice if or froze if it will be put in the freezer. So next is classification. So means children can classify objects into groups and subgroups. For example, they can group objects based on color, shape, or similarities. And then seriation. So a child's ability to group objects based on height, weight, or importance. So this is an essential concept to master as children require the skill during math and science. So next is the formal operational stage. So this is from ages 12 and up. So this is considered as the last stage of cognitive development. So these are the major characteristics and developmental changes during this time. So they begin to think abstractly and reason about hypothetical problems. Begin to think more about moral, philosophical, ethical, social, and political issues that require theoretical and abstract reasoning, and they begin to use deductive logic or reasoning from a general principle to specific information. So at this stage, the child can analyze their environment and make deductions. They can create theories about what is possible and what might happen in the future based on their existing knowledge. So this is known as the hypothetical deductive reasoning, an essential part of the formal operational stage. So it allows someone to consider what if. So a person with this skill can imagine multiple solutions and potential outcomes in a given situation. For example, a child can think numerous ways of solving a single problem, then choose the best option on how or based on how logical or successful it is likely to be. For example, math problems. So they will try to look for a better solution on how to answer the problem in an easy way, or shall we say um, in a way that they will not or dili ra kay sila maglisod. So factors that influence how children learn and grow. So there are some factors that contributes to the development of children, or shall we say the cognitive development of children. First is the schemas. So it describes both the mental and physical actions involved in understanding and knowing. So categories of knowledge that help us to interpret and understand the world. For example, a child can develop a schema of a dog. So initially, the word dog only refers to the first dog they met. However, over time, the word comes to represent and include all dogs. So when a child puts this schema together, they may call every similar animal a dog before they master the category. For example, kakita silang iro. So tawag ko, tingnan na to, oh, that's a dog. So doggy, doggy. So if as he develops, so every time makakita siya four-legged animal, he will call that one a dog. So so until nga ma-master niya ang category sa dog and every similar, even if laylahi og forma basta kay iro, so tawgon na niya og dog. And then we have assimilation. So the process of taking new information into our already existing schemas. So at this illustration, so for example, so the child saw this four-legged animal for the first time, so calls her four-legged pet doggy. And then by the time he got or she got home, he calls her four-legged pet doggy. So the child will call this a doggy. So when a child first sees a Dalmatian dog, the child will interpret this information based on his or her existing mental frameworks and will label it doggy. Next is accommodation. So another part of adaptation is the ability to uh, change existing schemas in light of new information. So at this illustration, so when the child saw a cow for the first time, she will assimilate it to her schema of doggy as four-legged animal. So when the mother told her that it is a cow, she will accommodate this new information and will refer to that animal as cow, not a doggy. And then the child will learn that not all four-legged animals is called doggy. And the next is equilibration. So this is maintaining balance between applying previous knowledge, assimilation, and changing behavior to account for new knowledge or accommodation. So as children grow, so they will try to balance their learning. So there is this so-called disequilibration, and then until they will uh, find balance on their learnings, and everything will be in, uh, shall we say, in balance. So, for example, the child calls her four-legged pet doggy. So, the child called the new animal a doggy, and the mommy told her it is a cow. For example, he saw her dog, then called her doggy, and then by the time that it saw a cow, so since it is a four-legged animal, also he will or she will call her a doggy. So, and then the mom will try to correct her. And then after that one, the child will call the four-legged animal as a cow. So that is applying previous knowledge and changing behavior to account for new knowledge, assimilation, and accommodation. So that his or her learning will be in balance. Okay, that ends my presentation. Thank you so much for listening and have a good day, everyone.